All right, thanks everyone for coming today. We are very excited that we were able to reschedule this event that we originally had planned for April of 2020. So it's been a while. My name is Emily Finch. I'm the invasive species specialist with the Dubois County Soil and Water Conservation District. So I am here for all of your invasive plant questions. And I really want to thank all of the groups that had worked on planning this the first time around and the second time around. The Invasive Species Awareness Coalition of Dubois County, the Jasper Dubois County Public Library, the Soil and Water Conservation District, Purdue Extension, and also support that we've received to help fund this from two different grant sources, the Clean Water Indiana grant, which supports my position, and also the Dubois REC Community Fund grant, which helped also with some of the event costs today. One thing I do want to also thank are those who have donated door prizes for today. So the Invasive Species Awareness Coalition purchased one copy of each of the presenters' books. So those will be drawn at the end of the presentation. As well, we have, you might have visited with Donna Ray with Ancient Roots Native Nursery. The winner of that door prize will get to choose which native plant they would like to take home. She has options. And also, we have a $50 gift certificate from Goldfinch Native Plant Nursery. They weren't able to attend in person, but they are also a newer native plant nursery located in Evansville. There is a flyer that we have out there with their sale dates that are coming up. For those of you who have never heard of ISAC, just a little bit of background. We are a local kind of partnership or cooperative invasive species management area, or CISMA. They are groups that have more recently started popping up around the state. And so we're comprised of some agency folks like myself with the Soil and Water Conservation District, but also lots of volunteers and private landowners, all concerned about the threat of invasive plant species in Dubois County. And our mission statement, we raise awareness and slow the spread of invasive species in Dubois County. You might have seen over the past few years some of our billboards. Our pretty awful calorie pear billboards were the first. And more recently, we had Break Up With Your Burning Bush, which features a photo that our own Ron Rathfun took of burning bush spreading in a forest understory. We also have available outside several of our handouts on native alternatives to invasive plants. That goal of ours really providing people with not just what's bad about invasives, but the alternatives, the good plants that we want to see out there that are beneficial to our ecosystems is kind of what drove the planning behind this event. And of course, I would also like to throw out, if I hadn't talked to you out there, I am available for free site visits to landowners dealing with invasive plants in Dubois, Davies, and Martin counties. So there's my contact information, but we also have flyers out in the hallway that also have that. And without further ado, Ron Rathfun is going to introduce our speakers.
It is truly my privilege to introduce our speakers tonight. Sally Weeks is retired from Purdue's Department of Forestry and Natural Resources as a dendrologist and botanist. Her more than 30 years of experience studying both woody and herbaceous plants in the Midwest and beyond helped provide a solid learning experience for her students. She has degrees from Purdue University in Wildlife Management and Forest Ecology, has published The Trees of Indiana on CD, Native Trees of the Midwest book in book format, Native Shrubs of Indiana on CD, and the Book of Shrubs and Woody Vines of Indiana. And I can truly attest that her enthusiasm for plants is contagious, and she gets asked to speak in many venues like this across the state. And she is one of my go-to people for plant identification. Her along with Mike Hamoya, who is a retired botanist for the Indiana Division of Nature Preserves. But Sally's a great resource to be able to go to for plant ID. And she has been a wonderful friend and colleague through the years as well. Her husband, Harmon Mickey Weeks, grew up in South Carolina with an early interest in birds. He received degrees in wildlife, forestry, and ecology and joined the faculty at Purdue in 1974. He taught numerous courses on wildlife habitat and population and conducted research on birds and mammals. Mickey is the co-author of both Native Trees and Indiana Shrub books, and he retired from Purdue in 2011 and continues to be active in natural resource issues. And I think Mickey and Sally were some of the first people that my wife and I actually met when we moved to Indiana, because we moved into the Southern Indiana Purdue Agricultural Center just north of Patoka Lake back in 1992, and they were staying in one of the facilities there. I think you were on a sabbatical or something at the time?
Yeah, we had the exotic trailer.
You had the exotic trailer side pack. So that's a very fond memory that we have, and we've had a wonderful association since then. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sally and Mickey Weeks, and I believe, Sally, you're going to come on first.
Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So many familiar faces, former students, and it's wonderful to hear that you're still in natural resources and especially pulling all those blasted exotics. So anyway, what we're going to do this evening is, first, I will speak about some of the natives that I've planted, where we live now, which is close to Attica. It's about 3.5 hours straight north of here on 231, or just off of 231. And then also have planted on several of Purdue properties near the West Lafayette campus, and have watched them grow or not for nearly 40 years. So you learn a lot if you plant your own plants, as you well know, and live with them and watch them. And if you're a fan of Charlie Deem, which I have been for decades, you know that he said to know the plants, you have to live with the plants. And so that's what we do. And I honestly have to tell you that I've had very little problems growing natives, whether it's trees or shrubs or plants. They just seem to do really well if you go with natives. And there are a few sticklers, but I'm not going to talk about them tonight, because I want you to to plant those that are happy and healthy, easy to grow, and hardy and all of that. So anyway, I'll talk about the plants that I enjoy planting, and you cannot believe how hard it is to narrow down my list. And I tried to shrink the list down to Southern Indiana, Southwest Indiana in particular, and then Mick is going to come up and speak about the wildlife issues. He's been the wildlife professor for a long, long time, so he's very knowledgeable. So why natives? To me, they're beautiful, and I guess I'm a little biased, but that's okay. But they're adapted to our environment. They evolved with our soils. They evolved with our insects and our diseases and all of the good or bad. And that's just how it goes. You bring in something from out of country, and you have no idea how things are going to go. And you notice I have an asterisk beside the easy to grow. As I said, there are some that are very, very easy to grow, and others are so difficult, I just can't recommend them. As you know, the natives are great for our wildlife, and sometimes a little too great. Your deer will come in the yard and they will eat off all of your wonderful berries that are growing, and you are going to harvest them tomorrow. So that's just how it goes. If you plant it, they will come. And so The thing that's been most frustrating over the decades for me is that quite often natives are very difficult to purchase and sometimes absolutely impossible. So you have to go out and learn how to propagate for yourself, whether it's with cuttings or just germinating seeds. I am not a professional landscaper at all, and I will show you how things are evolving from early spring here to later. And this is the front of our house, and you're facing the house. So this is the left side of the house. And you're seeing, you can't tell it, but there are at least 12 species, native species of shrubs and some ferns and a few herbaceous plants, all in this big patch right here, which gets about half a day of sun. And then I throw in, I'm not strictly a native planter, I throw in other things that I like that I know are going to behave themselves. And so this is a rhododendron. But okay, and see this guy right here, all of these little clusters, this is our native Pachysandra, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. It's a nice ground cover. And watch what happens in the next picture. So that is in May. This is like third week in May. This is the Pachysandra now. Here's a winter creeper, or wintergreen, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Here's the rhododendron in full bloom. Here's interrupted fern, blueberry, bog rosemary, potentilla, one of our native willows, on and on and on and on and on. So. And then the next picture is you're looking to your right from this same position. And here's more Pachysandra in flower, and bog birch, and another willow, and a native Lonicera. And it goes around the side of the house, and just more and more and more as you go. And this is what it looks like. And as I said, I am not a professional landscaper, and you can tell by looking at that mess. It is bad. But what's so interesting is, if I back up one, see this is something that Mick, being the bird person, sort of adjusted. It's a bird feeder, plant basket hanger, and he adapted a big bracket across the top, and he will have as many as 10 hummingbird feeders hanging from there, and the birds are nuts. They grow. I don't know what it is about that area, but we will have literally hundreds of hummingbirds coming to this little area in the summer. It's mind-boggling, but super fun. And one thing that we love is this bog birch that's growing right down here sets fruit and starts bursting its capsules about the time the hummingbirds are building their nests, and you see them down there gleaning all of the little fluffy heads off of it. It's so fun. And then if you turn around, this is actually from our upstairs window looking out into the yard. This used to be a hayfield when we bought the place. So this is the Wabash River Valley. You can see the trees, and that's the other side of the river. So the river's down here. This is a hayfield of ours. And then this is the yard. And it has changed. That's about 15 years after hayfield. So it grows fast. This is all tall grass prairie that we planted in the middle there. So it's now a bird heaven. It is truly a fun place to sit and watch and listen to. I'm going to go over some species that we've planted at several locations and that are easy to grow, and a lot of them are readily available in nurseries. Holler if you have a question, otherwise I'm going to go through these pretty quickly because my husband can talk up a storm, so I have to save time for him. So Arrowwood, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this. What bothers me a little bit about it is, can you tell that this leaf is shiny? This particular species is so taxonomically screwed up. Is that the proper term you would use? It's not good. And lots of people try to split this particular species into several. And one of the ways that they do that is because of the leaf. And this leaf, it's from a species that's coming in from the east. The nurserymen are bringing it in, and the leaves are very, very shiny. But if you look at our native, it has a very lightly downy leaf. It's very soft, and this is it growing actually at Crane Naval Base, not too far from here. Viburnums are all white flowered, very large. They're beautiful. The fall color is spectacular. Fruits are small enough that migrating birds like thrushes in the fall are going to hit these fruits readily. And this is another favorite, if you're familiar with this, it's scattered all across the state in very nice woods. It's maple leaf viburnum, and you can see that fall color is spectacular. The leaves look a lot like a maple leaf, and that's the name where it came from. Beautiful black fruits, and this species only gets about 3 to 4 feet tall. It just doesn't do a lot. It cannot tolerate full sun at all, and is one of my favorite viburnums, actually, just because it seems to be so delicate. Fragrant sumac is one of those. If you think of sumac, most people think of these gigantic clonal species that are also native to Indiana, but this one is scattered across the state, and it's my favorite for several reasons. One is the trifoliate leaf that you're looking at there, very unique. And then the fruiting structure is much smaller, so it's only maybe 2 inches tall at most. Very interesting looking fruits, similar to all the others. And I love the buds in the wintertime. I'm a big bud person, so I love this one. And there is a horticultural variety that kind of, the grow low, I think it is, or low grow. That one's a little problematic simply because it likes to collect leaves in the fall, so it's difficult. Has anybody planted this? It's kind of a pain, but still, if you put any sumac in full sun, it's going to be beautiful. Dogwoods, I don't think you can go wrong if you plant a dogwood in your yard. The birds love it for several reasons, and Mick is going to talk about that in a little bit. Alternate leaf dogwood, if you want a gigantic shrub that looks like a small tree, this is it. And every single thing about this I love. And you will find this in nurseries, and it's listed as Pagoda dogwood, just simply by the structure of the growth form of the plant itself. White flowers, purplish twigs, beautiful fall color, blue, dark blue fruits that the birds love. It has everything. This is another species that occurs down in this region and is scattered across the state. But again, dogwood, you can't go wrong, but the very unique fruit color on this is striking, I think. And the fall color on every dogwood I've ever seen is spectacular. White flowers, it's easy to grow. Anybody familiar with the shrubby cinquefoil? I have seen this planted from East Coast to West Coast up into Alaska. It is extremely hardy, and this is our horticultural variety. I love these fruiting structures in the wintertime. They kind of look like a sunflower. And then the delicate little compound leaves that kind of look like fingers. I think there's a common name that has something to do with fingers too. So it's a very small shrub. I mean, if it gets 2 feet tall, it's a big one. So. And Winterberry, I picked this one for several reasons. It's pretty sizable, but if you plant it, you have to have male and female plants. If you plant it close enough to each other, you'll get a lot of these winterberry-ish looking fruits that kind of look like Christmas. But we've had mockingbirds that will fight to the death over those fruits all winter long, and they are so fun to watch. We don't have mockingbirds much up our way. I know you guys do. Yes?
Well, when you say you need a male and a female, will both of them have the berries or just the female?
Females only. Yep. Interesting gray looking bark and just weird looking twigs. Anybody familiar with this species at all? You look at the Latin and it's Rubus and you think, oh, it's just a briar, but it is not. It has no prickles on it at all, but what it has is very sticky glands all over the leaves, especially the petioles. I don't know if you can see that, but all that red is glandular hairs, so it's sort of sticky. And that leaf is big. It's bigger than my hand. And this is growing outside our back door on a very rocky, clayey, thin soil in Fountain County. And if you can see, there's a little bit of light, filtered light shining on this, and that's all it needs. It cannot handle much sun. If you have ever gone to Versailles State Park, you might have gone on the right trail to see this growing, and it can get rather sizable, but I've never grown any that's taller than maybe 3 feet most, and it just slowly suckers. This was one plant, and now it's about 4 feet across maybe. So these flowers are large. They're over an inch in diameter. And then the fruit down here is covered with glands, very sticky again. Nothing eats them, so it's really just more of an ornamental for you to enjoy. But very unusual, and I see this in nurseries occasionally. Itea, this is in the swamps in extreme southern Indiana, the toe. And this is growing, this is actually in South Carolina, but that's where you have to go to find this plant. But always remember that if you find a plant, whether it's woody or herbaceous, that is growing in very wet sites or very dry sites, they're adapted very well to stress. And so usually, not always, usually you can take it out of that situation and put it in your yard as long as it can tolerate your soil. So the Itea, Virginia willow, which is not a good name because everybody thinks it's a willow, grows. This is outside our house, and look at the unique tubular-like clusters of dangling white flowers. It is just a beautiful thing. The twigs, I'm a big twig person, red and green depending on which side is up and which side is down, and the fruiting structures are there all winter long. And there is a dwarf variety of this on the market I've seen that is maybe 3 feet tall. Some of you experts probably know this better than I do, but out in the wilds, this can become pretty sizable. So anyway, I love this plant. Fall color is gorgeous. Does anybody follow Doug Talamay? He's the big, yes, he promotes certain species that are going to attract pollinators and insects to your yard. And I think second on his list is salix, willows. But what he fails to mention is that willows are really not pretty at all. They have major insect issues just simply because they attract so many insects. So I photographed this one willow that in our yard. I took these yesterday, but this is about 6 plants that we put in there probably 10 years ago or so. And they're all in a row here. They're probably 12 feet tall by now, and at least that wide. We have 14 native shrubby species of willow in Indiana. Most people don't realize that. And it's just starting. This is a picture from yesterday. So the little pussy toes are just starting to open up, and they're pretty darn cute. I'll have to admit that. And then they call it Silky Willow because of the leaf backs, which look silky. They're usually covered with either a glaucous coating, a white coating, or white hairs. And it's a striking willow, but this is very gangly and not that attractive. So, and this is one of the best I can show you. So we have almost all of our natives growing in one yard or another, and they're great for insects. I'm telling you, some of the willows that bloom first and then set their leaves, you know when they're in flower because the bees are just all over the place, and that's going to happen at our place in another week or so because as you can see, the buds have already burst. So it's pretty amazing to see how many insects are going for these flowers because the willow flowers are just laden with nectar. So it's a great thing to have in your yard, but you have to really, really love native shrubs and trees to put a willow in there. Anybody have blueberries in your yards? Or no? Yes, a few people do. It's amazing how easy blueberries are to grow. And one thing you have to keep in mind too, if you're going to plant shrubs, I'll talk about trees in just a minute, but if you want to plant shrubs, it's pretty nice because if your soil is like ours, I lovingly call it the soil from hell. It is truly horrible. It is 2 different types of heavy clay and rocks. And the topsoil is long gone because it was farmed forever. So you just dig a little bit bigger hole than what you need and you amend the soil. And then you have a happy shrub. And so that's what we do with the blueberries. Our soil is rather alkaline. And that's the norm for Indiana anyway. But this is a native blueberry that grows both in the northern part of the state and the southern. And this is it growing up at the dunes. I'll kind of circle it here. It's in flower right now. It's a very small little shrub, maybe a foot tall. And there are other species. We have, I think, 6 different native vacciniums that are in the state. And of course, they produce blueberries. So you can eat them. The birds can eat them. It's a great thing. And absolutely adorable little bell-shaped white flowers in the spring. New Jersey tea, this is more of a prairie species, and again, loaded with nectar, and the pollinators come out in full force, and the little, I call them pie tins on a stick. You see the guys that juggle and, do all the balancing things, and that's what that looks like to me, but an interesting fruiting structure. But this is only like 2 feet tall or so. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. The Spireas, we actually have 2 native to Indiana, and this one occurs in southern Indiana as well. And if you have a nice wet site or not, you can plant this. We have it growing in our soil, and it doesn't seem to miss a beat. But this inflorescence from top to bottom is about 2 feet tall. It is impressive. And our other native is a white flower, but this is pink. And very interesting, very downy leaf backs on this. And this is a huge cluster of it growing up in a wetland in northern Indiana, but it's quite striking. And Leatherwood, I threw this one in because it's one of the most interesting, I think, in form. Very formal-looking dome-shaped shrub that grows very slowly, and it's just about ready to flower right now. And that's what it looks like in flower, and there are the fruits. They are gone before you know it, and then you just have this rounded, small shrub. And Native Americans used to, if you try to take a twig off of it, it's as supple as it can get, and you can wrap it around your finger, it won't break. And Native Americans wove baskets and other things out of it. It's a very, very unusual shrub. And here's the Allegheny Pachysandra, which I mentioned at the first. And this is a native ground cover from, I think, one county over in southeastern Indiana. And I have started seeing this at nurseries. It is an excellent replacement for Japanese Pachysandra. If anybody has tried to talk somebody out of planting that, tell them to try to get this. These are the flowers, and ours will be flowering soon. Very unusual looking things. And there's the leaf, and there it is in flower in front of the house. But this is it growing. It's about 6 inches tall, and it just very slowly spreads. It's a very interesting little plant. Running Wahoo, anybody know that one? It's scattered all across the state. It's one of our euonymus. Some people call them strawberry bushes, but that's a different species. We have 3 euonymus native to Indiana. And the strawberry name comes from this little capsule that's all lumpy on the outside and looks kind of like a strawberry, but this thing spreads very slowly across the ground. And notice it has green twigs. Anytime you have something with a green twig, first off, it's interesting, but second, the deer will go for it, so you got to be careful there. Wintergreen, this is another spreading ground cover that it is not native this far south, but it grows on the dunes in pure sand. And you talk about a stressful environment to grow on. I think it would take the heat of southern Indiana nicely. I've never tried it, but this is it flowering in July. This is it overwintered, so the fruit is still there. It tastes like Pepto-Bismol. It's very edible. So, but that whole plant is about 3 inches tall, and it spreads very slowly. A couple of vines. Cross vine is an interesting native vine down here, and the flowers are so amazing, and the leaves are very interesting. You see it if you go out into a woods, especially a bottomland woods, you'll see it growing there. We're growing it up at one of our Purdue properties.
I think crossvine is growing on the river wall, if anyone wants to see it.
I would believe that.
I haven't caught it in flower. I do remember the first time I saw the leaves, and I was very confused.
It's a unique leaf. Okay, just a few things about, there are way too many species to talk about. I'm sorry, I could talk all day. But the oaks are tremendous. The mighty oak, everybody knows oak trees and probably loves oak trees. You have to give them a lot of room. So you got to have a big yard or a lot of property. But if you weren't familiar with a couple of them, the chinkapin oak is the most drought-tolerant oak that there is out there, and a beautiful whitish gray bark that looks kind of scaly. I love this bark. The chestnut oak and other species of oak, you've probably seen them, turn just beautiful colors in the fall, and this is a species that grows down in this area. More in the, I would say, in the Hoosier National Forest region, but it's a southern species mostly. And southern red oak is one of my favorites. I love going down to South Carolina and looking at this species where it's super common, but it is common in southern Indiana. And the leaves, those are all off the same tree, if you can believe that. And in the summertime when it's in full leaf, the leaves just kind of flop over like they're dry or something, and it exposes the leaf backs, which are very hairy and tan colored. It's just a beautiful tree. The hickory's another species that I think is fairly safe from invasives, and a spectacular form on these. This is an open-grown shagbark hickory. This is bitternut, and the fruiting structures, of course, are very important for the fruit itself for wildlife. Yellow color, fall color, is usually the norm for the hickories. Flowers are absolutely nothing to look at, and most people don't even know they're in flower, but it's that impressive, sturdy tree that is, I mean, most of them are long-lived, 200 or more years old, and just a thing to plant for your great-grandkids. Two smaller trees, Spirea, which is ironwood, also known as, maybe you can get that, figure out why from this fruiting structure, eastern hop hornbeam. The fruits look like hops. And it's a small tree, usually, especially as the farther south you go, which makes no sense. And this is it growing in the UP. A very scaly type of brown bark, but very, very durable tree. And then Serviceberry, which Emily had on the first slide of her talk. I get so happy when I see it flowering because it just makes me know that spring is here. And it's a beautiful thing. This is a rock outcrop that this tree is growing on. And it's a very small tree, beautiful smooth gray bark, and native to Indiana. And this list is one I put together when I put the book together, but this is my main source of natives simply because we live 3.5 hours north of here, and we jump on over into Illinois, and there's a native nursery over there called Possibility Place. And Woody Warehouse, which is down closer to you guys, that we've done some business with, and they sell lots of wonderful things. So. Next, I think I talked longer than I was supposed to, is my husband. So, Mick, you're going to have to cut this short. Can you do that?
What do you think, man?
No, I'll try to curb it. I was just thinking of all the things I'd like to talk about when in going through this, not only individual species, but also a few. I guess it's a professor in me, but I want to give you some wildlife insights into what wildlife do and what they need, and so I will, but I will try to limit it. Okay, wildlife needs, pretty simple, huh? Food, cover, water, and juxtaposition. That sounds simple, but it's really very, very complex when you think about it, because you're dealing with so many different species. If you're talking about food, for instance, what does a grain-feeding bird like a chipping sparrow feed its young? Seeds? No, they don't. They feed them insects, okay? So, and why do they feed them insects? Protein. Protein's the name of the game, and so no matter what they feed on in other seasons, they switch to insects in the summertime when they're raising young, and a lot of species do that, and so it's important to know that if you say what's an important food for species A, Well, you have to say, well, it depends on whether species B is present, or what time of the year it is, or what the landscape looks like, because all of that changes with time. I got to tell you this, just so you'll know. She's laughing at me already. If you notice squirrels on roads recently, they're licking on roads, and if you ride down, keep your eyes open, they're hunkered down on the road. Well, what they're after is salt. Okay, from road salting operations. And why do they need salt then? Is because now is when they're budding. They begin to cut buds, especially flower buds of trees, which are high in potassium and flushes sodium out of the system. And they're very, very fleshy and full of water. And so no matter how much sodium you can remove from your pea, if you produce too much pea, you're going to lose sodium. And so they're out there doing that dangerous thing. Just think if you had to get a little salt, you had to go hunker down on a highway to get it. So all these things are really kind of related. With cover, I'll talk a little bit about different kinds of cover. Water is particularly important and really kind of unique. I could ask a group of hunters, does white-tailed deer need daily water, drinking water? And, you would get a hair-pulling wrestling contest because some say absolutely and others say no, they don't. In reality, they do sometimes, and they don't other times. And a lot of it has to do with, right now, they're eating, for the first time, the green stuff that's just beginning to green up. And they switch to that suddenly, it's full of water. So it's about 90% water. So they got to eat a lot of it. The water overwhelms their system. That growth has potassium in it, which flushes the sodium out, and then deer start using salt licks right at this time of the year and continue on through midsummer. So a lot of this is connected and changes from time to time. And I'll try not to digress much more. Do you know what juxtaposition is? I'm just talking about the various needs being proximate to one another. Okay, theoretically, if you have a bird like bobwhite quail that needs a brushy old field, woods, agricultural crops, and some other feature, grasslands, and you've got many, many acres of each of those that only touch at one place. So you got these big acres of grass, big acres of crop, and they come together. So right here in this one spot, that's the only covey of quail you're going to have. Okay, simply because they need all those on a daily basis, and if they are too far away, they can't access them. So, therefore, break your big areas up into little areas. Then you can put 20 square feet next to 20 square feet next to 20 square feet of different things. Animals can hit them all at one time, and you've got all the satisfied needs. So you, instead of having one covey of quail, you may have 20. Okay. Seasonal foods, I've already mentioned that. Foods change seasonally depending on a lot of things. Whether you've got the summertime here where there's a lot of greenery, the foods might be completely different. And in this context of the greenery, you would have insects, of course, at that time of the year, which are extremely important for especially songbirds at this time of the year. And in the winter, what in the world do birds live on? Well, in the winter, you've got your woodpeckers, and you've got nuthatches and chickadees and titmice and all that's still here. And they are feeding, and when they're not feeding on my suet cakes, they're feeding on larvae of insects and adult insects down under the bark and the like, and again, after protein for an extended amount of time. But it does change season to season, and things are different in their availability. Food types, I've already mentioned insects some, many things, especially a lot of the shrubs that we deal with produce fruits, which are very attractive to a lot of songbirds and small mammals. There are also seeds. See these little things down in the corner? So, anybody know what that is?
Is it Shrubby St. John's?
No, it's not. But that's a good guess, because some Shrubby St. John's has got something that look like that too. That's ragweed. Okay, and if you get giant ragweed, which can grow 20 feet tall, it has the same looking seed. They're just bigger. Okay, so it produces a lot of seed that birds absolutely love, especially in the wintertime. Seasonal cover. So I mentioned they need cover. Well, they do need cover differently in different seasons. In the upper left, there's a blackberry patch, which provides beautiful cover for nesting catbirds, for instance. In the wintertime, it provides good escape cover. If a Cooper's hawk is after you, if you can get into that blackberry patch, you're safe if you're a young, small songbird. And you also see, I've got a picture of a wood thrush on our nest there. The requirements of individual species are individual. Okay, so that wood thrush, she's sitting right there. I could hit her with a stick. She's in a wide open area. You would think, well, she would nest in the thickest place available. Well, no. Some species nest in very thick cover, others don't. If you have too thick a cover, some species, just like the wood thrush, just simply would not use that woody cover. So you've got a lot of things going on and to consider, and there are no absolutes. I guess that's what I'm saying. Principally, you have to blend in all these changes over time. Cover can be permanent or temporary. This is upper left is a coralberry patch, ideal for nesting field sparrows and yellow-breasted chats and all those kinds of things. If you don't have that and you need something immediate, you can build brush piles. Okay, all that emu honeysuckle you're pulling out and cutting off and hauling out of your woods, put it on a nice pile, and when it's new, I can almost guarantee you that a brown thrasher will nest in it the first year. And so you can get temporary and things until you can manage your habitats to produce the permanent cover that you want. Water is extremely important. And again, I've talked about, do animals require water daily, et cetera, et cetera. It's quite variable depending on food they're taking in and how much the water content of food is and all those kinds of things. But water certainly attracts certain species that would not otherwise be there. And of course, anytime you have a droughty situation, water really attracts birds. And by doing that, it gives you the message that they really need this water. They're limited in the water supply to make the habitat the very best. Juxtaposition, for instance, this hayfield with the surrounding deciduous woods in the springtime, that's probably not the best shape. You've got things next to each other, but the only place that they are next to each other is a strip where they don't come together, whereas it'd be much better to change the shape of your outline. And in natural woods, and of course, this is in our yard, and we've planted various and sundry things. And Sally didn't mention, but a lot of things that we've planted are really state endangered species, and most of them do quite well if you give them a little bit of attention. But you can put this little patch of shrubs there, and it serves as a patch of shrubs in an opening, and is used by birds, especially for nesting and the like. Natural versus anthropogenic. Remember natural, the upper one is a natural woods. Well, you can tell by looking at it, it's 20, 30 years old, maybe. So it's only natural because nobody's messed with it recently. And remember, Indiana is that way. There is almost no natural woods, if you mean outside the influence of humans. Okay, so we've been in there and screwed with it and messed around with it for a long, long time. So, but when then we let it go, then we'll call it natural, as opposed to our yard. Okay, so you can certainly plant and build habitats, and they will come if you want to do it yourself. When you're trying to attract birds and the like, birds especially, but this applies to small mammals and all if you want to have them around. I've got this thing against small mammals. For instance, chipmunks are awfully cute, but they run through, they eat a lot of bird eggs, and they run through a lot of suet cakes, and they cut the foundation of your porch and your house, and they do all kinds of interesting things. So I'm not in the long live the chipmunk fan club. But at any rate, but I like a lot of mammals. I've studied a lot of mammals. But it's important to remember that I live on the edge of big woods. Things I want to attract birds. The things that are going to come are big woods things. Okay, I'm not going to get a Kirtland's warbler there, or I'm not going to get a worm-eating warbler there, and in many of those things, because you're constrained by the landscape as to what birds or mammals you're going to be able to attract. And so you don't want to get your hopes too high or try to do the impossible. But be happy with the species that are there naturally and encourage them. Okay, let's talk about a few species. And this will be a little bit different than what Sally presented, but some of the same. These are the dogwoods, and with songbirds especially, dogwoods are...
If you want to stay by the mic so we can capture the audio. Sorry.
You're lucky I'm not down in front, because that's where I want to be. And but this, I find that any of the dogwood species, and there are several dogwood, shrubby dogwood species, the ones that are white fruited are highly preferred by songbirds. And that would include rough-leaf dogwood. It would include gray dogwood. Can't think of many more. Anyway, if they have the white fruits when they're ripe, that really is a go-getter. And you'll get migrating thrushes and warblers and all feeding there to your heart's content. If you sit out in your yard with a shotgun to get keep the starlings off of it, okay? Other thing with dogwoods and with plants in general, and this is one thing I enjoy Ptolemy's work on talking about insects, because most of us vertebrate people don't really, I love insects and try to identify all of them that I encounter. But where was I going with that? No, don't ever get old. I was going to say, I don't know, I'll remember it in a minute. But one of the things that one of the things that you need to remember is not only, and if you get a book from Audubon Society or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, plants that are valuable to wildlife, okay? They're going to give you plants based on their food value. So they're going to give you things that produce a lot of fruits, or that produce, but the other important thing is cover. okay? So you can have a plant that doesn't produce berry one, but is really important for cover, for nesting of songbirds, escape cover, and those kinds of things. So you need to consider all that together. And dogwood is a very good example. This branchingness, notice they are opposite branched. And if I were a yellow warbler and I was trying to build a nest right there, well, I can't point it, but you know, in one of those V's, they
Use the mouse.
if I move that mouse,
There you go.
okay. Notice the opposite branching right there. And I'm trying to put my nest there. And there are two branches, just two branches for me to attach all of that nest material to so it doesn't fall out, it doesn't blow off or whatever. It's almost impossible to do, okay? So dogwoods are very poor for nesting songbirds, if you're interested in nesting songbirds, because they have that basic disadvantage. Okay, Sally talked about Winterberry. I don't think I need to add much to Winterberry, except that it is, if I had to say what are the most highly preferred fruits in Indiana for songbirds, Winterberry wouldn't be on the list. It'd be way down the list, okay? And the reason being that it's not very much preferred by birds. They don't like it. They eat everything else first, and then in the midwinter, when you get to February and it's cold as you know what, and they're stuck needing food, then they turn to Winterberry. Then, unfortunately, they turn also to the bush honeysuckles, the Maccaei, and in the late winter. So these things, whether they look preferred or not, are really important for the overall survival of the birds. The vaccinium species, many of you, when you think of blueberries, you probably think of the larger blueberries, even the domestic ones that are developed from high bush blueberries, and so you can go berry picking and that kind of thing. But if you've been up in the north woods or northern areas that are burned frequently for blueberries, we're talking about blueberries that are about 12 inches tall, maybe, in a field situation. That's completely different, okay? The ones that use the high bush, the birds that use the high bush would probably be old robins and brown thrashers and catbirds and the like. Those that use these low shrubs are usually ground nesters that are using these shrubs as overhead cover to conceal their nest, as opposed to somewhere to attach the nest. So again, same genus, used differently by different species.
We have 5 minutes here.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't think, if you're basketball fans, you know of the, don't ever digress. Who's the guy that died of cancer that they do the cancer?
Jimmy V.
Jimmy V. Yeah. And Jimmy V was giving a talk. He was dying of cancer, and he said, "The guy back there is trying to get me to hurry up. I mean, what am I going to? I'm dying. What difference does it make? You know?" And not that I'm dying, but I do have something worthwhile to say. And anyway, Carlberry, she introduced you to Carlberry, a really neat plant. Gets very shrubby clumps in southern Indiana and in old fields, especially bottomland old fields. And songbirds love it for nesting cover. It produces a lot of fruit, very pretty fruit that nothing eats except white-tailed deer. So deer really like it, but it'll sit until it turns brown and black over winter. Blackberry I like to clump blackberry along with black raspberry simply because they complement one another greatly, because the blackberry is usually a late summer kind of producer of fruits, and earlier in the year you get black raspberry. So if you have both of them, you've got a good mix that supplies some fruits to birds and small mammals for a long period of time. Blackberry does have the added dimension of being very thick, and it provides very good escape cover as well as nesting cover in general. Elderberry, most of you again know elderberry, growing principally in old fields. It produces a huge quantity of very small berries. The size of berries is important, not only what they got in it, but if small birds that are no bigger than 5 inches are going to swallow it whole, and remember they can't chew it up. Okay, they got to swallow it whole. It's got to have small berries. So the smaller the berry, the better it is for songbirds in general. But it's generally a very good producer. Not much for cover. It looks like it might be cover, but the twigs are very thick and sparse, and not much nesting by birds in those situations. Alnus. I think I'm gonna jump over Alnus. Alnus is, if you go, it's some in Indiana, but if you go up into the northern lake states, almost all the stream sides are covered with alder species of one kind or another. Those are important cover habitats for moose and deer. It's important for small birds that are associated with those kinds of habitats. And so, and the fruits produce their little conelets. I don't know what their real name is. Is it conelet? That produce a very fine seed when it ripens in the winter. And goldfinches love it. Pine siskins love it, and in those kinds of situations. So they provide some food, and of course beavers take all those stems along the creek beds and the like very regularly. Hazel is a favorite of mine. It's in the northern part of the state especially, but here too. It grows always on fence rows and along fences, and produces cover in doing so, but also produces hazelnuts. So these are very much like hazelnuts that you would go to buy or in a Christmas nut mixture or something, and they taste very much the same. The production is sometimes, as you see here, pretty good, but you still have to beat the white-footed mice and all to them to be able to get any for yourself. Crataegus, I think I'll hold that off on talking any more about Crataegus. Crataegus is a very interesting species. It's very much like Winterberry in its use by wildlife because the fruit is very dry, and it'll hang on the tree until midwinter. In fact, on Purdue campus, for instance, there's a lot of Crataegus planted, and heavy crops, and they just sit all winter until the robins come back through in the springtime, and then they eat the berries that have been frozen thawed until they're soft and mushy and evidently very flavorful. I mentioned black raspberry. Black raspberry I don't think has quite as much cover value as blackberry, but because it produces its fruits earlier in the season, it is an important complement to blackberry if you're trying to manage your wood's edge or your yard. I had a long song and dance about vines. I love vines, but I will just mention that vines are really, really important in woodland situations, and I know if any of you are foresters, you probably spent some time cutting vines off of grapevines off of crop trees, and which is all right. But if it's not a crop tree, don't cut that grapevine because it's got a lot of value, okay? So all of these are fruit producers. You have wild grape, you have greenbrier, you have Virginia creeper, which is, you often don't see these because they climb to the top of the trees usually before they flower, and poison ivy. So poison ivy is fruits are really favored by songbirds. Poison ivy is, no, I best not digress. Can I say one thing? Okay. Poison ivy is really unique because poison ivy leaves are one of the primary summer foods of white-tailed deer. So they eat a lot of poison ivy leaves. In the winter, the twigs in a woodlot situation are eaten very heavily by cottontail rabbits. Okay, and in years that you get good fruit production, they say that yellow rump warblers winter further south than in years that don't produce good crops of poison ivy. So even the least of these are important. Okay, that's a nice buck. He's eating acorns. Okay, now she's not gonna like this, but she's not gonna like that. Okay, I just want to talk a little bit about acorns because we didn't talk very much about oaks. Oaks are really important because you mentioned, Sally mentioned that Ptolemy said willow is the number two insect attracting tree species, tree genera. Number one is oaks. So oaks are hugely important in everything from attracting insects, pollinators, and the like, to producing acorns that are very high in energy, okay? Don't do squat for protein, but they really are important in energy. And so in years that you get good oak crops, deer are significantly heavier. Squirrels have significantly higher larger litters, and a significantly larger number of squirrels breed in those years where you have a good fall with acorns. So it tells you that acorns are really important in the overall scheme of things. The second thing having to do with acorns, I want you to remember this because this is kind of important. It's something most of you probably, well, maybe all of you know, but maybe most of you don't, that we have two different groups of oaks. We have what's generally known as the white oak group and the red-black oak group. And we don't want acorn failure in any given year because it's really hard on wildlife. The thing that causes acorn failure is almost invariably a late frost while they're flowering. Okay, so they produce flowers and set little nuts just like apples do or just like peaches do or whatever. And so that is, when they get those hard frosts, it kills those flowers, and therefore they don't produce any acorns. So you get whole woodlands with absolutely no acorn production unless you have a mixed woods of red oak, black oak, and white oak. Because the red-black oak group takes 2 years to produce acorns. So this spring, white oak will flower, northern red oak will flower. If you get a late frost, it's going to kill the flowers of both of them, and you will get no white oak acorns that fall. Will you get black or red oak acorns? Well, maybe, because the acorns that they are producing were set last year. Okay, and if you had a good spring last year, those acorns are going to ripen in 2 years, and they will be available this fall. Okay, no matter what the weather is doing. So that's an important consideration. And why? If you're a woodland owner, you really need to kind of not only favor oaks, but favor multiple species of oaks and the red and white oak groups. Okay. I know I'm not allowed to take any questions, right?
We can probably take a question or two if folks have any questions for Vicky or for Sally.
Yes.
I have a woodcock, and I'd like a little information on how I could maybe help sustain its habitat. Early successional grasses, but...
Early succession stuff for woodcock is good, but not just grasses. You need some woody structure. So if you had scattered woody plants with grass growing in between, that would be very good. They seem to really like woods edges, so that if you get woods edge with black raspberry coming in, they will frequently nest in those areas. The woodcock, it's important to remember with woodcock too that you can attract performing birds. And that's one of the things you want to do. If you get grassland and you can mow little lanes just before they arrive, which would be in late February probably, you're going to start mowing, that gives them a platform to perform on. So they like overall habitat, but they need low stuff because they got those short legs and they can't trip around in all that long grass. So they really like to open the area, bare ground, or whatever. Neat birds to have around. If you ever get a chance, if somebody says, well, we're in the Sycamore Audubon Society, this Audubon Society is going out to see woodcock tonight. Go with them. That's really, really neat. Other questions?
Habitat for bluebirds.
Habitat for bluebirds. Fairly open. Okay, bluebirds are really open land species. If you build the best bluebird box in the world and put it in the woods, you're not getting any bluebirds. Okay, so they really like scattered shrubs or scattered trees, even fence posts, and other than that, a lawn is quite good. You can, as long as you keep it mowed. They like that low area because they can drop down, and if you watch them when they're feeding on, they're dropping down and getting crickets a lot, and small grasshoppers and the like. But then put your nest box at 5 feet on a post in that mix, not too close to any shrubs or trees, but kind of standing out by itself.
And that'll keep the wrens and sparrows away?
Well, that won't keep the wrens and sparrows away. You have to be just vigilant. Sparrows, when they're first laying, house sparrows, roost in the nest. So if you sneak up, put your hand over the nest hole, and put a plastic bag around it, you can get the female. And there's a guy that wrote a book on bluebirds, for instance, he was an old guy, probably as old as I am, maybe older. And he kept this long bluebird trail, and that was what he did. That was his livelihood, and everybody knew him. And he had a young TV reporter there looking at his bluebird operation, and he says, well, this is bluebirds, but this has got a house sparrow in it, and we don't want to encourage them. And she says, well, what do you do? He said, we best not talk about it.